Nobody in that room expected it to go that way. Pam Bondi had been sitting at that witness table for hours. She had deflected questions about redacted co-conspirator names. She had called Thomas Massie a failed politician. She had called Jamie Raskin obsessed. She had told a congresswoman asking about Epstein victims that she wasn't going to get in the gutter for her theatrics. She had been in control of her performance, aggressive when pressed, dismissive when cornered, always pivoting before an answer could land. And then Rep. Ted Lieu of California reached into his folder, looked up at her and hit play. 22 seconds, that is all it took. This is not a story about one video clip. That framing is exactly what Bondi's team would prefer, a single theatrical moment that can be dismissed as political theater and forgotten by morning. This is a story about what that clip represents and why Bondi's reaction in the 22 seconds it played, and in the minutes that followed, told the entire chamber something she had spent 5 hours trying not to say out loud. The Epstein Files Transparency Act passed Congress 427-1. Both parties, a binding legal mandate, release everything. Every document, every photograph, every file from the federal government's investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's network. What the Department of Justice released was, according to multiple members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, roughly 1% of what the law required. The names of co-conspirators were blacked out. The names of victims were exposed. And the footage that Rep. Lieu played at the February 11, 2026 House Judiciary Committee hearing, footage drawn directly from the officially released Epstein files, showed something the DOJ had quietly made available to the public without flagging what it contained. It showed Donald Trump, it showed Jeffrey Epstein, and it was filmed at a party. Bondi's response to that 22 seconds was the moment the chamber went still, not because the clip was new, it had been in the released files. Because of what Bondi did after she heard it, and what she asked for next. Let's go back to February 9, 2026, 2 days before the hearing, because that is when lawmakers first began reviewing the unredacted Epstein files at a Department of Justice satellite office. The DOJ setup had been constructed to limit what any member of Congress could actually learn. 4 government-owned computer terminals, accessible only to members of Congress, not their staff. DOJ employees standing directly behind every lawmaker, logging every search term typed in real time. No phones, no assistance from congressional aides. The software was, in the words of Rep. Jamie Raskin, clunky, confusing, and unreliable. Raskin went in on February 9th and searched Trump's name. It appeared more than 1 million times. He came out and told reporters that is more than 1 million mentions the DOJ had chosen not to release. He also found a 2009 email exchange between Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in which Epstein's lawyers described a conversation with Trump saying Epstein was never a member of Mar-a-Lago, only a guest, and had never been asked to leave. A direct contradiction of the account Trump had been giving publicly for over a year. Rep. Thomas Massie went in on the same day. He came out and told reporters he had seen the names of at least 6 men who had been redacted from the files, men whose names appeared in documents connecting them to Epstein's network, men who were not Epstein victims, who had no legal basis for protection under the Transparency Act, but whose identities the DOJ had quietly shielded anyway. Massie said he would probably reveal those names from the House floor or in a committee hearing. Those 2 days of document review built the foundation for what happened on February 11th. By the time the hearing began, at least 4 members of Congress had sat at those 4 terminals and seen what was in the files the DOJ had chosen to suppress. The hearing was not a fishing expedition. It was a confrontation with documented evidence, and Rep. Lieu had brought specific evidence in the form of footage that the DOJ had released without fully reckoning with what it showed. February 11, 2026. The Rayburn House office building. 9 survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse were seated in the gallery, dressed in white. Their names were read into the congressional record at the opening of the hearing. Teresa Helm, Jess Michaels, Lara Bloom, Majid Danny Bensky, Liz Stein, Marina Lassiter, Skye and Amanda Roberts, family of the late Virginia Giuffer, Charlene Lund and Lisa Phillips. Bondi did not look at them during her opening statement. The hearing ran for more than 5 hours. It was by any measure one of the most combative oversight hearings in recent congressional history. Raskin opened by telling Bondi she had acted with a mixture of staggering incompetence, cold indifference and jaded cruelty toward more than 1,000 victims. Massie told her she was responsible for this portion of the cover-up. Rep. Pramila Jayapal asked survivors to raise their hands if they had never been contacted by the Justice Department. Every hand in the gallery went up. Bondi refused to turn around and face them. She called the request theatrics. Through all of it, the shouting matches, the personal attacks, the pivots to the Nasdaq, Bondi had maintained a version of control. Aggressive, dismissive, always attacking rather than answering. She had called 3 separate members Trump derangement syndrome. She had accused Democrats of ignoring crime in their districts. She had told Rep. Hank Johnson that his questions were as good as his record. And then it was Rep. Ted Lieu's turn. Lieu did not build slowly. He had a specific line of questioning and a specific piece of evidence, and he moved toward it directly. He asked Bondi whether there was any evidence that Donald Trump had attended parties with Jeffrey Epstein at which underage girls were present. Bondi said there was no evidence Donald Trump had committed a crime. Lieu then played the clip. 22 seconds of footage from the released Epstein files, footage that had been made publicly available as part of the DOJ's document production, showing Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein at a social gathering together. The audio was audible in the hearing room. The footage rolled on the screen behind Lieu while Bondi sat at the witness table 6 feet away. The chamber went still, not because the footage was classified, not because it had never been seen. Because Rep. Lou was playing it in a congressional hearing with the Attorney General of the United States present, with 9 Epstein survivors seated directly behind her, with every camera in the room rolling and asking her to account for what was in the files her department had released and simultaneously failed to act on. Bondi's reaction was immediate. She said the footage was ridiculous. She said Democrats were trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump had done. She said there was no evidence that Donald Trump had committed a crime. She did not engage with the content of the clip. She did not acknowledge what was visible on the screen. She began raising her voice. Lou did not stop. He put up a second document, an FBI witness statement from a man who told the Bureau he had driven Trump in a limousine and that a woman in the vehicle told him she had been raped by Trump and Epstein. Lou told Bondi, "I believe you just lied under oath." Bondi stood up from her position at the table, turned toward Chairman Jim Jordan and asked him to intervene. That is the moment. That is what asking to leave looks like in a congressional hearing room, not a physical exit, a demand to be rescued from the question. Here is the part that nobody expected. It did not come from Democrats. The crack in the wall had been forming since February 9th, when Thomas Massie walked out of the DOJ's 4-computer terminal room and told reporters he had seen the names of at least 6 men redacted with no legal basis. Massie is a Republican. He co-authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act. He has championed transparency on this issue from inside his own party since before Bondi was confirmed as Attorney General. On February 11th, Massie used his time to confront Bondi with 2 specific documented failures simultaneously. The first, the DOJ had published a list of Epstein victims' names that had been sent to the department by the survivors' own lawyers with a specific written request not to release those names. The DOJ released the letter and the names together. Massie said it plainly, literally the worst thing you could do to the survivors you did. The second, Leslie Wexner, the billionaire founder of L Brands, once parent company of Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works, had his name redacted from an FBI document that listed potential co-conspirators in the Epstein sex trafficking investigation. Massie spotted the redaction and asked Bondi directly who was responsible for obscuring Wexner's name in a document where he was identified as a co-conspirator. The DOJ unredacted it within 40 minutes of Massie raising the issue. His response was 6 words that defined the hearing: "Within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed." Bondi told Massie he had Trump derangement syndrome. She called him a failed politician. This is the Attorney General of the United States responding to the Republican co-author of the Transparency Act, the law she was obligated to follow, by attacking him personally in a public hearing. That is not a defense. That is a signal. When your only available response to documented evidence from inside your own files is personal attack, the room understands what the silence around the evidence means. Here is what this means legally, because the stakes are specific and they build in one direction. The Epstein Files Transparency Act is a federal statute. It passed 427 to 1. It mandated the release of all unclassified records and investigative materials in a searchable, downloadable format by December 19, 2025. It did not authorize the DOJ to redact the names of men simply to spare them potential embarrassment or political sensitivity. That framing comes directly from Rep. Raskin's description of what he found inside the unredacted files. It did not authorize the DOJ to expose the names, photos, and intimate details of more than 1,000 victims. It did not authorize the removal of file F200000468, the photograph found inside Epstein's personal desk drawer at his Manhattan mansion, from a government website the morning after it was posted, with no explanation and no announcement. All of those things happened under Bondi's direct supervision. All of them are now in the permanent congressional record. The DOJ Inspector General has announced a formal investigation into whether the agency complied with the Transparency Act. The Government Accountability Office, at the direction of Sen. Jeff Merkley of Oregon, has launched a separate probe. The House Oversight Committee voted 24-19, a bipartisan vote, with 5 Republicans joining every Democrat, to subpoena Bondi directly in March 2026. Rep. Nancy Mace moved the subpoena. Rep. James Comer, the Republican chairman, sent a formal letter stating the committee had questions about DOJ compliance with the Transparency Act. Bondi did not appear for her April 14th deposition. No communication, no coordination, nothing. Rep. Robert Garcia said it directly on the record: Bondi has illegally defied our committee. On April 29, 2026, Democrats filed a formal contempt resolution. 45 minutes later, Republicans on the committee announced May 29, 2026 as a new deposition date. The timeline is the timeline. Contempt filed, 45 minutes, a date appears. That sequence is in the permanent congressional record. Here is where this goes from here, and there are 2 paths, both of them lead to the same room. If Bondi appears at the May 29th deposition and answers questions under oath, those answers will be placed directly beside the documented record from February 11th. Lou's clip, Massie's red-handed moment, Raskin's million-plus Trump mentions, the 9 survivors with every hand raised, Bondi asking Chairman Jordan to rescue her from the question. If her sworn testimony aligns with that record, it raises one set of questions. If it does not align, it raises a far more serious set. If she does not appear, if there is another no-show, another job title argument, another letter from a new official claiming the old obligations no longer apply, then the Republicans who currently have enough political cover to call the contempt resolution theater will lose that cover entirely. The 5 Republicans who voted for the bipartisan subpoena will face a direct test in front of the public record. And a former attorney general who asked a committee chairman to rescue her from a 22-second clip will have no available frame for a second no-show that does not confirm what the clip already suggested. Think about what Rep. Lou's evidence actually consisted of: a video clip from the officially released Epstein files, an FBI witness statement from the officially released Epstein files, both produced by the Department of Justice under the Transparency Act, the department that Bondi ran. The release she oversaw, the files she produced, and the moment that footage played, the moment those 22 seconds ran in a hearing room with Epstein's survivors seated 2 rows behind her, Bondi's entire position collapsed into one sentence: "This is ridiculous. That is not a legal defense, that is a reaction," and the room understood the difference. Maria Farmer reported what she knew to the FBI in 1996. She named names. The report entered a system. System did not call her back. On February 11, 2026, the women in white, the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse, sat in the gallery of the Rayburn House office building and watched Rep. J. Apple ask them to raise their hands if the Department of Justice had never contacted them. Every hand went up: Teresa Helm's hand, Danny Bensky's hand, Bensky, who first encountered Epstein in 2004 when she was 17 years old, the hands of Virginia Giuffre's family. They watched Rep. Lou play 22 seconds of footage. They watched Bondi ask to be rescued from the question. They watched Chairman Jordan intervene. They have been waiting for decades. The names are still hidden, the accounting is still owed, and the 22-second clip is now in the permanent congressional record alongside the demand for accountability that nobody in that room had the authority to ignore. Here is what the next 30 days hold. May 29, 2026 is the deposition date. Bondi sits in that room without the Attorney General's office behind her, without the institutional protection of the Justice Department, without the ability to ask a committee chairman to end her time, just a witness under oath. The DOJ-IG investigation into Transparency Act compliance is ongoing. The GAO probe runs parallel. The contempt resolution is still active, Democrats have not withdrawn it, and the April 14 no-show remains in the record regardless of what happens on May 29. File 468 disappeared from a government website and came back with an explanation that did not survive scrutiny, and that sequence is still in the record too. When Rep. Lou played that clip on February 11, Bondi called it ridiculous. She asked Jordan to intervene. She stood up from the witness table. In a deposition room there is no Jordan, there is no committee chairman to call on, there are questions, a transcript, and a legal obligation to answer. The 22-second clip is documented, Bondi's reaction is documented, the chamber's response is documented, and on May 29 she will have to answer for all 3. The room she asked to leave is still waiting for her.